So, but let's before we go into the corrupting influence, does anybody want to say anything more about the original source? Yes, please, way back.
Bobo has said actually, like some of us might have that experience, and some like, sometimes that inner voice within you that you hear, that is my voice. So sometimes, people might have that experience, so I don't know how to relate that to the intuition. So it is actually a pure inner source within us that somehow prompts us to something, or give us a signal, or, like, as you said, each individualized character or soul might experience it differently. But
I have trouble with the light in back of you, but I think I'm talking to Mahu.
Yes.
Good. Welcome, Mahu. It's lovely to see you.
Same here. Thank you.
But Mahu, excuse me, I am worried because you're sitting right square in the middle of the door, and there's quite a bit of wind coming in.
Yes.
And I just don't want you to catch cold there. Is there any way you can move a little bit?
Yes.
Because that's a very exposed, you're in a very exposed position
You
there.
could close the door.
You think that might be the best thing to do?
I sat here so I could see you.
I know, I appreciate that. That's sweet words, but I still don't want you to catch pneumonia. Is there any solution to that?
Well, I think you can, if you close the door like
Not all the way.
People have said there's no air. if you close the door.
No air if we close the door.
Yeah.
I wish we could get those people right in front of the
You want to
doorway.
close halfway? Maybe.
Well, they opened the windows up on that side.
Or are they open or closed now?
Those are closed on that side.
Well, I think they should stay closed, shouldn't they? Otherwise
Maybe
we
you
get stuck.
can open those and close them.
No, because then we're losing the light, you gotta open the shade.
And Mahu, please move a little way to the side of that open space because you're still square in the middle. To your right, love, please. That's a little better, and you're a little further forward, not quite so much in line there. That's good. Still closer? Oh my God.
If I could make a comment on some of the things we're already seeing that we found in our previous work is getting back to Steve's question, what is the definition of intuition? We automatically think of a simple answer to these things, and once we start exploring it, we find there isn't a simple answer. There's a lot of different things that need to be taken into consideration. And as soon as we start asking, well, what is intuition, we see, well, we're asking about the scope of intuition, we're asking about the source of intuition. Once we start talking about the nature of intuition, we find, oh, there's certain advantages, maybe certain disadvantages, we have obstacles, we have dangers. So there are many sub-chapters within this whole, within this inquiry, and that would be the subject of the primer.
Tom, would you tell them, for instance, what Marge Sudkoff came out with as to her experience of intuition, because that was so radically different from what the males had been discussing. Do you remember her?
Yes, she talked about her bodily sense of intuition. She works with some kind of a therapy method that involves her hands, and it involves her intuition of the hands going to the right place, doing the right thing in order to accomplish what she needs to do. And she says it's really a very automatic process that the mind doesn't participate in, and it's not a matter of feeling in her senses, in her hands, the flesh or anything like that. She just knows intuitively what to do in order to bring about a result. And she said, experience shows her, if she just has faith and trust in that and lets go, it works. When she tries to over-control it, think about it, try to figure out what's happening, then it doesn't work.
She did one other thing too, also that impressed me very much. Whereas the males who had launched off first were talking about, let's say, the need for a bit of quiet. Marge suddenly popped up and said, well, in my case, it's exactly the opposite. I have an intuitive, strong impulse when there is a terrific crisis, either in family or people who I'm very close to. She said, that's when I have an intuition. And frankly, that stunned me. But several people since then that I've compared notes with say, well, many of their strongest and most valuable intuitions are in the crisis periods.
Sherry wants to say something.
Yeah.
If I may share a story, this is very
Please
much
do
in
share
line
it.
with what you were saying about the bodily intuition. I was, a few years ago, I was actually taking some classes in shiatsu massage. And so there was the structured system. But one of the things that my teacher told me is she said that this is a dance that you've got to go with. You just got to dance with the body. If you want to think about what you're doing, you're missing the point. And I was traveling in India, and this is completely separate, but it's actually woven into each other, like you were saying, Don. I was traveling in India, and my friend and I hooked up with this young lady who was traveling from Canada, actually gone to Israel and coming to India. And the last day that the three of us were all together, she was sharing with us that she had this really bad pain, which was in her back. And she asked us if we know any massage or anything like that. And I said, well, actually, I'm taking some classes. If you want, I can give it a shot. No promises, but I can give it a shot. She said, sure. So I started trying to work on her back, basically, and massage it a little bit. And the more I massaged it, the more I went by the textbook, the worse it got, okay? And I thought, wait a minute, there's something wrong here, right? So I asked her, just completely intuitively, I asked her, well, how did this happen? Have you ever had any treatment done before? She said, well, the last time that I had treatment was 2 years ago. And the person who did this was a professional masseur who did this, massage therapist who did this, and he actually got it much worse. And something just there told me, okay, that do not press. All you got to do is be gentle. It's as if the muscle had the memory of being hurt, and every time you went for the massage, okay, it would react and it would tense up even more. Now, if you go with gentleness here, this is how it's going to resolve the issue. So I turned around to her and said, I'm going to do something which sounds really crazy to you, but just be with me, just bear with me. She says, well, what are you going to do? She was a little bit concerned. And I said, I'm going to talk to your back. She said, whatever, right? And so I started just caressing her back very gently, and I said, it's okay, you're going to be fine. And I'm talking to the muscle in her back. You're going to be fine now.
Sherry,
yes.
Can I stop you just a moment? Did you say these words out loud?
I said these words
Bless your
out loud.
heart. Okay.
I mean, she was lying on the bed, and I was sitting next to her, and I was going I was actually talking, like facing and looking at the back, the muscle in the back. And I was telling the muscle, I know you've been injured in the past, I know you've been hurt, but it's okay. I know people have tried to treat you, and it's actually worked to your disadvantage, but you're going to be fine now. She's going to take care of you, she's going to look after you, she's going to be gentle with you, and so on and so forth. And I started talking to the muscle as if it was a little baby which was hurt somewhere in the past. And all of this was intuitively. Within the space of 5 minutes, she fell asleep. But after she fell asleep, I just put my hand on her back, do nothing, just keep it warm, right? After a while, I got kind of bored, tired, right? So I got some towels which was on the next bed, and I just put it on her back and removed my hand, okay, just to keep it warm.
Oh, that was
and I went
sneaky.
off. So that was
sneaky.
Very much so. Very much in character with myself. And then I went, okay? Now, about a half hour later, she woke up, and she came to me, and I was with my other friend on the balcony of our hotel, and she came to me and said, what did you do? It's gone! And I'm going, I just talked to your back, right? And that was it. So very much in line with that body intuition that you're talking about.
Sherry, one more question, very key. Had you ever talked to a part of your body or somebody else's body before?
Actually, I had talked to a part of my body before, but nobody else's. It was like one of those things that... I'm serious. It was one of those things that I was okay, being a cuckoo to myself. At that time, I felt like, a little bit anxious about looking like a cuckoo to somebody else. But, at this point, it was like, do or let it be. So.
Well, we're in the midst of, I think, a fascinating example of intuitive processes things that one is led to experiment with frequently for the very, very first time. Can I tell my little story now, add on to his? This all started happening when I went into the hospital for this famous episode of getting my prostate removed about 4 or 5 years ago. And I knew Baba was going to use that as a major episode in my life to sort of shake up a lot of sanskaras. By the way, I remind you all 3 words that belong together as far as Baba's terminology is concerned. A sanskara is also an impression, and it is also a habit, and it is this which produces desire and action. These are the things that fit together. But at any rate, I've been so aware of the fact that, as Baba explains to us, that from the first human incarnation, what we have as our total responsibility is gradually get rid of our sanskaras. Probably not any of the natural sanskaras, but the ones that we have done since human volition came into being. So I knew Baba was going to use the hospital episode, which certainly was a karmic event. He didn't have anything to do with forming it, but he was going to utilize it since I had to go through it. And I was sure he was going to do it to shake up my sanskaras. Did I tell you when I was through here last time about the room partner with a snoring problem?
Yes, but there are a lot of people here who weren't at that.
Who weren't at that? Well, I just have to tell you that it all started off when I knew that I was really front and center when my roommate turned out to be a person with an absolutely fantastic snoring capacity. And within a half an hour after the lights had been turned off, I heard the most incredible performance I've ever heard in my life. The only way I can describe it to you is this man had mastered, obviously unconsciously, the process of concerto snoring. This means that he was the solo instrument, he was also the symphony behind, you see. He did both parts to perfection. So this was just the beginning of a whole process. Eventually, down along the line here, we get to the point where I become terribly aware that an awful lot of things that I had never realized about exactly what are samskara habit patterns, impressions in my body, bodily functions. And I had this sort of thing after this really fairly major operation that had to get worked out and another thing and so on. And some of them were a little bit cranky for a while. And one day, just purely intuitively, I suddenly thought to myself, well, Baba told me that for all of my life I was to report to him regularly. And you've all heard this little story. After Baba dropped the body, I didn't send telegrams or letters anymore to Baba and the trust. It just didn't make any sense to do that. So I thought messages. But then, for some reason or another, I just had the instinct or the intuition that this wasn't quite right and that I should try, at any rate, something that I automatically resisted, which was to make my report to Baba out loud. And as soon as I did my first out loud report to Baba, I wasn't asking him for anything. I was just telling him what was going on in my life, what was moving smoothly, what was hung up, what I was really befuddled about, didn't know what was going on. But as soon as I made my first out loud report to Baba, my God, all hell broke loose and things moved and things that had been sitting absolutely glued tight to the floor moved for the first time. So I knew this was an important principle. So here I come out of the hospital, the song clinic, and concerto snoring and a few other things like that, terribly aware. And you remember the episode where I forgot how to dry myself off after a shower. I had blocked that habit so much because of all of these tubes and so on that were strung into me that I had blocked the habit, and it took me 2 years to reestablish the habit, to be able unconsciously to dry myself off without thinking about it or doing any planned action. So here I am, and I've got this little bit of a problem and that problem, and the bowels don't quite move properly, and the typical sort of things that you've got to move on. All of a sudden I thought, I wonder. This is what intuition, all of a sudden something says, I wonder. and you give yourself a little bit of private breathing space, and then you spin a little fantasy for your story, for yourself. I mean, I think the fantasy itself, the outline of it, is a deeply important part of the intuitive process. But you've got to welcome it, first of all, and not just say, oh, crazy idea. You know? But just sit and listen a little bit as this thing begins to spin itself out. So my little fantasy story was, what do you think would happen if you tried talking to that particular part of your anatomy? Well, I must admit, even after having talked to Baba out loud, the idea, Shariar, of talking to a part of my body out loud, I thought, oh, Stevens, you're really getting cockeyed now. You better be careful. But I did it, because I've learned you've got to trust these things, right, Tom? Trust is an important word, as Debbie brought out in the group in Atlanta. There's so many times when things don't work out that you get pretty mistrustful, and then you've got to go back and be deliberately trustful in order to move ahead. So I tried talking to this part of my body, and you wouldn't believe it, but it immediately took it to heart, and it worked properly. I don't mean that it was all cured or anything like that. There was no laying on of hands. There were no vibrations or anything of the sort or invoking mystic powers. I just talked to it like I talked to Baba, making my report. And it was almost as if that part of the body nodded its head and said, yes, and it's nice that you know me, you know. Almost as if I got a little reply back. This will get a little bit stupid if I go too far with this, but let's keep it down the side. I see Shariar knows all the wrinkles of what goes through your head on this sort of thing when you talk to your body. And then I tried it out with another part of my body. It seemed to me that the thing that was not quite right got a little bit better. And I found out gradually that the part of the bodily function that is the most difficult to get somewhere back into line are destroyed nerve. Muscles do pretty well, intestines do pretty well, eyes and ears and so on. But if you've got a shaky hand like that, then I was getting really terribly shaky. And you tell the nerves and the hand, you know, that let's do a more smooth, even, harmonious job. I usually talk to it when I'm about to shave, you see. That's right here that the hand really gets the shakiest, you see. So that's the critical part. But I seem to have that one under control. But this is an intuitive process, you know. It can lead you into some strange fields, and I think you have to say to yourself, let's not jump overboard. Let's try to keep it under control. But there are really things that are involved in talking to your own self, as if it were a friend and not some blessed blankety-blank part of your anatomy which is causing all these troubles, and why don't you do your job properly? You know, first of all, don't get mad at it anymore and talk to it like a slightly weary or a slightly not properly functioning thing, and cheer it along and see if you can't get some cooperation. But it's a deeply intuitive process. But there's so many of them. Adele wants to say. Now we're going to have the medical side. No? Oh no, she says.
What is the God if not God? The animate, the inanimate, who is doing anything? And of course, the tenor of the talk has to be with love.
With
Since
love.
that's all Baba is from.
Acceptance.
He is only love. I think actually it's.
Can you all hear Adele?
It's not quite simple and yet so difficult. And the simplicity is that if you do want to respond to a need that exists anywhere in your own self.
That's important what you say, Adele.
Rather than just, I mean, it depends how we feel then. Is it, I mean, the paradigm, I would say the template for how to deal with the body is our deobalgia. The body is Baba at work to help us in this whole fantastic process of what he's speaking about in God's speech. And it seems to me that the simple part is that if one is the pure-minded person who really is focused on Baba, and you're pretty darn sure and can trust yourself to the extent that you know that your intent is rather self-but. You're not praising yourself for it, but we do know when we're selfish. And we do know when we're less selfish. We do know when we're less impure. And if in a state of that sort, and we're focused and then want to know the next move, because it is true, life is a complete infinite series of decisions. So how do we go from one decision to another? We try our utmost to eliminate neti, all the garbage, as much as we can. So that's the hard part. The simple thing is that we know our intuition will not work if we're not in direct line with what Baba wants. And what Baba wants, we can learn by reading God Speaks and reading his discourses and just watching people who function in the world that really are people that are serving his humanity and his creation.
Adele, you bring up this terribly important point of attitude. What is one's attitude? What is one's end aim?
How free is it of ego? I always bring up the question of ego and purity.
Yeah. I have to tell you a secret, and that is ever since I started the God Speaks seminars, I've been very, very aware of the fact that it's a pretty grueling travel and, visiting schedule that inevitably develops from that. And you all know I'm over 80, and I know that to take on that sort of a load at that sort of an age, and then do it 2 or 3 times is asking an awful lot of what is left of the reserves of a physical body. But the thing that I just have to be honest with you, all of this conversing thing, Sherry, came up and came to front and center. I tried that because I was right at the beginning of launching off on the first series of God Speaks seminars. And so I was telling my body, what we've got to do this for is to do a good job for Baba, and let's hope it pleases him. So that's always the end of the conversation each time. So anyway, that's where we get back to Baba, and I have a very, very deep suspicion this is a very critical element in it. Now, we've got to take a look at where we are. We've got a little bit more time. I think one of the things that we've got really to come back to is, again, what Marge Sukoff was bringing up, that for different people, the intuitive function happens under drastically different circumstances from another person. That was what Marge brought indelibly home to us. Here we had been, I think, 3 males had spouted off about, you got to make a little bit of quiet time, or be a bit relaxed to give the intuition an opportunity. And then when Marge comes out and says, for me it's just the opposite. It's where there's all sorts of stress and push and urgency that an intuition comes to me. And then, this Sukoff family is, this you can quote back. The Sukoff family is a marvelous unit. And the husband, Ed Sukoff, who is just retired as professor of forestry at the University of Minnesota, chipped in at the end of a meeting up there where we were talking about intuition. He said, well, from what I understand, you've observed that it's terribly difficult to define, to give a definition what is intuition. But he says, it's obvious to me that you were pointing out that for different people it comes from different places. So what could be better perhaps in the long run? Maybe it's a default position, and simply to say intuition comes from this sort of source, that sort of situation, that sort of so on, so on. So you don't say, like Webster's dictionary, intuition is this, and it's manufactured by so and so, and this is the machine that does it. But rather, you simply list, because there's no other way to do it, the different types of circumstances, because they are highly individualistic. I suspect in the long run, just as individualistic as the drop soul itself is. What did you want to add?
Well, it seems to me like maybe that's the differences. My feeling is that intuition for all of us comes from the same place, but that the different circumstances are the uniqueness about that person's vibrations and sanskaras that tune their ear to hear the intuition but that it isn't necessarily that the intuition is coming from a different place for everybody, but that that's the uniqueness of the individual
But
that
the manner
allows
in which
that.
it comes can be terribly individual, perhaps. That is where the variation comes in. But I'll be perfectly honest with you, I think so far, and we haven't spent too much time on it, until now we've done a pretty lousy job of trying to scratch our heads and examine other possible sources of intuition than God. What about that? Will somebody else venture something else heretically that might not be God, that we might say, well, yeah, that's an intuition that comes from there too. What about it? You know, we just got to be open and not too hidebound.
I agree with what Kathy said and what people are saying, but I think part of what I'm not hearing that intrigues me about the whole idea of intuition is how it becomes language inside your mind, because there is
Awfully good point. Awfully good point.
a knowing. I mean, to me, there's a relation between the word intuition and the word recognition, because recognition is re-knowing, and it's always a good feeling. Like when you have an intuition, it's like it has a little wow to it, and it's that kind of that
Exhilaration.
pleasure of knowing again something that you already know. And it's our relationship to language very much is a part of our identity. Like I am American and all those kinds of things, and speaking is what I say about myself, who I am, just the whole I is part of my identity. So language, it forms me, and when my soul or my spirit enters language in some way, whether it's actually words or whether it's the motion of touching a body in a certain way or using words differently than you usually would because you're speaking aloud to God or speaking aloud to your own body, I think that that's what intrigues me about the whole process, is how each person allows that experience to be born into words or be born into movements or be born into something. So whether or not you think of it as God or whether you think of it as something that you as an individual have kind of acquired through your own experience in life that then you trust. And I think part of trust, I wanted, because I'm thinking about this too, is been very deliberate for me, that I have had to say to myself that I have an intuition about this, I'm going to follow it and see what happens, and find out if I was right or not. And just gradually over the years, learn to trust my own intuition, because my experience and my identity was really confronted with a lot of obstacles in my development, so I wasn't able to trust it from the beginning. Nobody was trusting me and teaching me how to do that, so it was a long process. So I think when somebody writes a piece of music or somebody writes a poem or somebody makes a painting, it's all this intuition that is allowed to be coded in some way, to take on a code that then is communicating both to yourself, because I can say to myself, now I have this intuition that Baba is God. I have this intuition that Baba is here in this room right now. Because it doesn't, so reasons. But it's, I think it's more that's always there, but I can say that to myself, or I can say that to you in some way, because it breaks the language barrier somehow, and breaks down the barriers that are ingrained in us because of the way that we learn language and what the purpose of it is. So
the whole question of putting things into word related to intuition is again a fascinating one. And I've also done an awful lot of puzzling about it and observing of the process. I want to be sure we come back to that, but I would like before lunch, if possible, to push us to find at least two more potential sources for what we would call intuition. For example, you first.
I think it's an interesting question to me about my question, but whether intuition is always a conscious thing, or whether intuition is also something that we might consider unconscious, but there's still a part of us that guides us intuitively that we're not even aware of.
That I think we can pretty well give a fairly substantive answer to now, and that is, it's pretty obviously that something is set en route in the unconscious part of our nature, which then, at some point or another, bursts out into the consciousness. So there is something that has been going on, somewhere or another it's been set in motion very frequently by a question one is posed to oneself, or an interest that one is posed to oneself. And then you're aware of the fact that this can go underground for hours, days, weeks, and then all of a sudden an extraordinarily clear and knit together insight into what you had started to think about comes out and you say, golly, that's exciting. So it is something that's gone on unconsciously, which then comes to the surface. But I want to find at least two more resources. Yes?
I figured this would work.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have an answer to your question, because I have a question.
Well, Lois, you got a lot of answers to a lot of questions.
But what my question is, and it does have to do with the resources of intuition, is what thought has been given to the role that dreams play in intuition?
Another very, very important thing. Let's say that dreams we'll put on our agendas being a possible resource or a possible part of the mechanism for bringing to the conscious mind. And let's tackle that. I still want at least one or two more before lunch. Shall we go to Billy next?
I was just wondering about, she was talking about composing music, Baba says we get second plane inspiration, poets, artists, musicians. And is that to be confused with intuition? One thing. And then the other was, it seems like maybe past life experiences could give us intuitions in the present life.
Really, here we are on number two. You're right dead center on what Baba gives us a very clear description of. And when you take a look at what he describes as the residue from past life experiences, because he goes into it word by word in the discourses. And that's what we've got to take apart and put into place and say, isn't this inevitably a very important part of our intuitive process? Does anybody remember the quote from Bob?
Is that in the reincarnation chapter?
Well, actually, I think I've got it quoted here. It was the London Intuition group that put it on their agenda. So we got it in hand. Do you want the actual quote? The truths absorbed by the mind in the life after death become in the next incarnation a part of inborn wisdom. Developed intuition is consolidated and compressed understanding distilled through a multitude of diverse experience gathered in previous lives. This is where you were dead centered, Billy. Different souls start with different degrees of intuitive wisdom as their initial capital for the experiments and adventures of their earthly careers. This intuition may seem to have been the product of past experiences, thus adding to the equipment of the psyche, but it is more truly an unfoldment of what was already latent in the individualized soul. But nevertheless, it goes through an experience, and in another, I can't remember exactly which one, in another writing, Baba goes through in a bit more detail than even he does here in the discourses, for what goes on in the period when we drop our physical body. Remember, he says that your whole emotional reliving is at a different level of intensity when you're reviewing the previous life, like the film, as he points out to us. And so, as a consequence, because the good things that happen to us when we're in the body. When the body is not there, they're extraordinarily more intensively good, and we take much greater delight in them than we think we're in heaven. Remember that quote from somewhere from Baba. And that conversely, the bad things and the unfortunate things we experience much more profoundly, and that we call hell. So I always think of the body as being something like a sponge or a mattress. It absorbs shocks. It absorbs emotional shocks. And when we haven't got it around, when we relive the experiences, those emotional shocks are not absorbed by the sponge or the mattress. So we experience them far more intensely. And Baba goes into the fact that the intensity of this experience is almost, let's say, like a furnace, burning away the dross, the things that we have learned in physical life and the things we associate with physical life. And what is left, I can't remember his exact words, but I remember as being something like the dust which is left after you pass something through an intensely hot furnace. And this is what is then stored in the mental body in the next lifetime and added to what had come from previous processes of going through the furnace. And then this becomes, I think in the other thing that I read, he calls it the inherited wisdom of the dropped soul. And this unconsciously becomes a beacon or a guide point for us in our actions. And he also points out, obviously, because we don't have the physical brain of these previous experiences, we do not remember in which circumstances they were generated, but the essence is there to guide us. Now, isn't this pretty necessarily a resource for intuition? The direction signal comes through, and all of a sudden you say, my God, there it is. I know what's got to be done. I know how this sort of thing works.
By inspiration and by visualization.
Now let's be careful, but go ahead.
But I'm just saying that those people are going to intuition. I think that it's just from experiential drop soul intuition.
You're going a bit too fast, so you got to be careful there.
Okay, I'm saying that there can be individual intuition that's taken from your experience of many lifetimes, and it's not always in alignment with the highest, what I would say, the highest form of intuition, which is God.
I think that's
There's
inevitable.
that gap.
But it's still something we've got to recognize, and that's why we're doing it here together. We're not saying it's good or it's bad, but that's how it
Not that it's good or
is.
it's bad, but that there's the balance. And this is in Buddhism. You go to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. You go to God, who is ultimate intuition, and you surrender to God as all-knowing. Then you have your own intuition that you've accumulated, which is when you're driving the car and you're going over the same pothole, going past the same pothole, you know where to turn there from your own experience. Then there's the Sangha, where you come together, and this is what you're saying about bringing groups together. You're involved with you expose your own intuition, so you don't get just lost and you know everything. You know, Bob's telling you, but you run that by other people.
I'm going to stop you because I don't want to jump into that part now. We'll get into parts of that in the group activity after lunch. But we've got just time because I'm going to squeeze us to get the third obvious part of intuition out here. So, what would you add?
I don't know, but I wonder. Often my intuition comes from other people, or the billboard you drive
I'm
by.
talking about your intuition. There are things that come from other people. But we're going to talk about just what your own inner resources of your intuition are. And let's keep thought transference. And
No, I wasn't talking about that.
Yep.
But sometimes well, maybe this isn't answering getting to what you're after, but
if nobody does it, I'm going to put it on
it's
the
not
line.
an inner voice. All of a sudden I'll see something, on a billboard, and that will be the answer to a question I didn't even know I
Why
had.
not? Why not? I think that's a hellishly good example. Way over there. Oh, forgive me. My shoulder's been turned in the wrong direction here. Please.
Well, I think God always knows the answer, whether it's if you want to know what happened with such and such, or if you want to know your direction in life. And how do you tap into that? And one of my methods is just going through all the alternatives in my mind. The life, and I can just, that isn't it, that isn't it, that isn't it. And then it's not always clear what is it, but it's kind of clear what isn't it.
That's a good thought. A good description.
What about
One more, and then I'm going to launch Stevens here. Harry, what did you put in?
Could it be the other source of intuition? Could it be what Jung called the collective unconscious? Or just sort of like this repository of humanity's thoughts into this like force field of knowledge, and you're tapping into that. Not necessarily all the way to God, but it's some sort of like in between there that we've all put into.
Yeah. All right, I think that's a good suggestion to offer, and let's make a mental note of that. I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to launch Stevens here. Go ahead.
Okay, sometimes if I want to, if I want to ask myself a question, I sort of embrace it with the totality of my being. As an analogy, Baba sometimes we talk about spiritual longing as either a desire or deeper inner longing, and he's drawing a difference between the two. And I think when I need to ask a question, if I can sort of embrace it and not sort of like from a desire point of view, but a deeper inner longing, I'm not sure how to describe the difference very easily. But if I just sort of like let that be and then sort of be in peace about it, and not a desire or anxiousness, but sort of like that tranquil lake, and just let it be, and hours or days or whatever go by, and then it just kind of comes into my consciousness. That's also how memories have come to me, like everything born and incarnating, they just sort of came in the quiet.
It's exactly the sort of thing you're suggesting that we will get into this afternoon. What can one actually do to assist the process go along? But I'm going to suggest to you the third one, and then I'm going to escape from the door before you kill me for suggesting this. But I'm just going to suggest our pool of personal sanskaras. Shocking, isn't it? But after all, where does Baba say our sanskaras are stored? He says they're stored as psychic knots of energy in the mental body. All right, so that's behind the conscious-unconscious barrier. They express themselves. They want to express themselves, don't they? We're suspicious of sanskaras, but when they express themselves, how can you differentiate the pressure of a sanskara coming out to express itself from, let's say, one that comes from stored wisdom or from God? How can you? Really? I just want to leave you with that thought. If you and I can be honest with each other and with ourselves above all, and my God, if we're going to get anywhere with intuition, we have got to learn to be honest with ourselves. It's the only way that it can move forward. So I just have to say, over lunchtime, reflect a little bit. Aren't the sanskaras themselves part of what come out from behind that unconscious curtain as an impulse? And how do you differentiate that from an impulse that comes from stored wisdom or from God, drop soul, avatar? It's a puzzle. That's where the danger is. I think we're just going to have to stop for lunch because we've got 2 hours minus, I think, 2 minutes. And then we're back here for a bit more lovely piano music. And then we'll get into some of the mechanics and how do you minimize some of these things. Okay? Shall we do it?
one element here. He's got 5 turns. One element and 1 factor. And now, because he's missing, we have low.
Oh, yeah, wait a minute.
No, no.
I'm not ready yet. Wait a minute.
She's still in the green room.
We're missing a camera too. What do you have for special announcements?
I have a, yeah, so, what's the announcement?
We're not missing it. It's here.
Okay. Charlie, I'll make the announcement real quick.
Okay.
Yeah. Charlie, Don.
Never saw you before. Welcome back from lunch, everyone. Hope you found your way around and explored the area and had a good meal. I understand some people went to my old neighborhood Mexican restaurant, El Jarrillo. It's where I grew up.
Still highly recommend.
Yeah, still wonderful after all those years. But anyway, I just wanted to make an announcement regarding next Sunday's meeting. It's a different kind of meeting than you're used to. In honor of Mara, we're going to be doing some service. We're going to be putting meals together, sack meals, to give to needy families and homeless. And so there'll be lots of singing and music and being happy in service together. So we hope to take the opportunity to come and participate. And that will be at 4 o'clock. Jacob.
Think how much time Bob has spent serving the poor. It's like, this is a real opportunity.
That's right, and I didn't even ask him to lay it on Vic. Thank you very much.
Well, we're all set to begin, except for, let me shut the kitchen door. Could you shut the kitchen door? Thank you very much. Great. Now, I was asked to introduce Don after half the meeting's gone. And the only thing that came to my mind was when he was first introduced to Baba, and that was by Ivy Deuce said, let me introduce to you, Baba, one of my Marines. This is Don Stevens. No,
You got that one wrong. She said, this is my boy Don.
This is my boy Don. And lo and behold, guess what happened? Baba turned the whole thing around and he said, no, this is my boy Don. and as you all know, it comes down to one thing, and that's who you know.
That explains it.
Yeah, and we're very, very fortunate to know Don. That's all I can say. We're really blessed by having him here. And so, without further ado, here's Baba's boy.
Quite know how boy applies to white hair and this and that happening here or there, but anyway.
Baba said it's your heart that counts.
The heart. Yeah. Sometimes it does a little pitter patter too. In good shape, Joyce? You in good shape? You all set and quiet and happy? Good. Joyce is the mother of one of our favorite persons over in the Paris group, her boy Ken. So you see, Joyce is very special to us in Paris. We don't have any boy in the London group though, Joyce. You have to send somebody over there too. I'll send Brett over for a while. He can come for a holiday.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, everybody. Well, almost everybody. Well, Tom, do you think they look like they're prepared for some real work this afternoon? Are you? Well, you look too relaxed.
John, you're a man who knows how to make work play and play work.
A lot of play goes into the work. Fortunately, with Baba. That was one of the wonderful things about being around Baba, because he had this extraordinary, exquisite sense of humor. Just when you were least expecting it, all of a sudden, he'd pull a real humorous one. Everything would sort of break up and then get down to business again. But I think his favorite clown who put up with Baba, the two of them had sort of a dog and pony act together. Which one's the dog, do you think? Yeah. Anyway, it was Dr. Deshmukh. And if you ever knew Dr. Deshmukh and you ever thought of a very proper university professor, you know, Tom is not an example at all. Dr. Deshmukh, I think he must have worn starch collars all of his life. And he would get out sooner or later when he was around Baba. There'd be a game of 7 tiles, and Baba to go through the act of getting Deshmukh into the act was really hilarious. I think I've all told you the story of one of the times when I was there, and Baba set off the game, and the 7 tiles were got and going. When it came up time for Deshmukh to come up, he was supposed, of course, to throw the ball, and he threw the ball, and I think it went out somewhere into the garage area, nowhere near the 7 tiles. Baba looks mystified and looks at Deshmukh, and Deshmukh looks at Baba as if Baba is the fault for all of this. And so Baba then gestures, the essence of the gestures is for you, Deshmukh, because he's so special. We have cut in half the distance to the tiles. So Deshmukh goes up halfway there, and he throws again, and you know, just absolutely incredible what happened. I mean, it went further afield than when it was double the distance away. So Baba halved the distance again. For a 3rd time he threw the ball, and you know, it just went nowhere at all. So Baba had him go directly over and drop it square on the tiles. And Baba was flexing his hands like this, and Deshmukh was flexing his hands like this. But you know, you couldn't believe, because again, this sense of humor of the avatar, to see Baba having fun with Deshmukh. It's terrific.
I had a question. I was just curious. How many trips did you make to India? Do you know over the course of your relationship?
There were 9 in which they were officially stamped in the passport, because they were during periods or for a length of time for which a passport, a visa was necessary. So those were officially. But then for a considerable period of time, there were various different ways that I could creep in and out on what is it? It's sort of like when you're changing planes. And I think Americans at one point were in a little bit better smell than they have been in various parts recently. And so we were given a few special privileges. So there were quite a few quick ins and outs, you know, 1, 2, 3 days that just weren't recorded at all. So I don't know. All I know is that towards the close of Baba's existence in the body, Harry Kenmore absolutely stunned me by saying, "Well, Don, I'm even with you." And he'd been keeping count of the number of official times I've been in and that he got in. I was his competitor, you see. Isn't that marvelous? Anyway, I thought Harry was a terrific stinker when I first met him. But gradually I saw him, I was really completely converted by his total love for Baba. You know, I've known a number of people who were very close to Baba who were not exactly my ideal of good, nice, simple, warm friends. But in each case, I found that the thing that was the really critical factor was this total devotion to Baba. And you could see it when you were around him in the right circumstances. And Baba got me into those right circumstances enough so that I sort of cleaned up my own mental inventory